Hey guys, tonight we're going to step back, way back, almost 5 millennia, to a place where the sun blazed down on endless dunes and the promise of eternity was a very real, very tangible pursuit. Imagine, if you will, the scorching heat of the Egyptian desert, the fine red dust settling on everything, clinging to your skin, even making its way into your very soul. You're standing, not quite in a bustling market, but on the fringes of something far more solemn, more sacred. The air shimmers, not just with heat, but with the quiet hum of purpose, of ritual. The scent of myrrh and other exotic resins hangs, heavy, a perfume for the gods, perhaps, but also a potent masking agent for what's to come. You glance around, and the faces you see are earnest, focused, their eyes fixed on a tent, not just any tent, but the tent where the work of preparing a soul for its eternal slumber truly begins. You can almost feel the dry, arid air prickle your exposed skin, hear the distant, repetitive chant of priests. A low drone that promises passage, not just to a destination, but to an entirely new state of being. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this journey unscathed. At least not metaphorically. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these quiet ramblings travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in ancient Egypt, a civilization utterly obsessed with death, not as an end, but as a meticulously planned transition. They saw it as merely a phase, a sort of lengthy visa application process for the afterlife, which they envisioned as an idyllic field of reeds, a paradise where you'd never run out of beer or bread. A pretty sweet deal, really, especially compared to some of the less enticing afterlives offered by other cultures, where you might end up endlessly pushing a rock uphill, or just, being vaguely gloomy. Their entire existence, from the grandest pyramid to the humblest clay pot, was infused with this profound belief in a continued existence beyond the veil of life. And central to this belief, the absolute cornerstone, was the practice of mummification. It wasn't just a funeral, right? It was an engineering feat, a theological imperative, and, frankly, a bit of a pungent science experiment. You're standing now, not as an observer, but as a silent participant, as if you've slipped through a crack in time to witness this ancient magic unfold. The sun beats down, relentless, baking the desert floor, but inside the tent, there's a surprising coolness, a deliberate shade created by layers of linen and palm fronds. The air inside, though, is thick, not just with heat, but with the cloying sweetness of myrrh and cassia, designed to counteract the inevitable ... unpleasantries. You can hear the low murmur of voices, the clink of stone tools, the rustle of papyrus. This isn't a hasty process. It's a meticulous 70-day odyssey, a commitment to preserving the physical vessel, so the soul, the ba, and the spirit, the ka, could have a familiar home to return to. Imagine, for a moment, a soul returning after a long, ethereal journey, only to find its body has well decomposed beyond recognition. That simply wouldn't do. It's like arriving home after a holiday, only to find your house has been replaced by a particularly enthusiastic pile of dust, highly inconvenient, the first step in this incredible process. The true commencement of the ritual for achieving eternal sleep is the preparation of the body. You watch as the chief embalmer, a man of significant status and even greater spiritual gravitas, approaches the deceased. His hands, you notice, are clean, almost reverent, despite the grim task ahead. He is, after all, performing a sacred duty, not just a biological one. The body lies on a specially constructed table, often made of wood, tilted slightly to allow liquids to drain. It's not a gruesome scene yet, more like a still life painting, albeit one with a very distinct expiration date. Now, a mainstream historical fact you might already know. The Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of intelligence, emotions, and memory. This is why, unlike most other internal organs, the heart was almost always left within the body during mummification. They needed that ticker to remain intact for the ultimate judgment in the afterlife. It was, in their view, the moral compass, the very essence of a person. If you think about it, it's quite a touching belief that your true self resides not in your brain, but in the beat of your heart. Kind of romantic, in a dusty, ancient sort of way. But here's a quirky or fringe tidbit. While the heart was sacred, the brain, well, they weren't too fussed about it. In fact, they considered it pretty much useless, a kind of packing peanuts for the skull, if you will. So, out it came. We'll get to the specifics of that rather unceremonious eviction in a later section, but for now, just know that for all their medical sophistication, the Egyptians largely overlooked the organ we now consider central to our consciousness. It's like building an incredibly complex rocket, but forgetting to include the navigation system. Oops. The initial incisions, you observe, are made with extreme care. The first cut is typically a long, vertical one on the left side of the abdomen. This wasn't just a practical decision, it was steeped in ritual. The left side was associated with the female principle, with life and fertility, and also, somewhat ironically, with death and the underworld. The instrument used for this critical cut was often a specialized obsidian knife, incredibly sharp, almost glass-like, and sometimes even made of flint. These weren't your everyday kitchen knives. These were tools imbued with symbolic power, designed to open the gateway to the internal landscape. As the incision is made, you can almost hear the soft, almost imperceptible sigh of release, as if the body itself is beginning its slow surrender to the forces of preservation. Before the main work begins, there's often a purification ritual. Priests, wearing masks of various deities, particularly Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, would perform chants and prayers. They would wash the body with palm wine and rinse it with water from the Nile. Palm wine, with its high alcohol content, served as a natural disinfectant, an ancient form of antiseptic. And Nile water, of course, was the lifeblood of Egypt, imbued with sacred significance. So you have this blend of practical sanitation and deep spiritual meaning, a recurring theme in all their practices. It's like washing your hands before surgery, but doing it with holy water and invoking a dog-headed god, effective and dramatic. The purpose of this first incision is quite simply to gain access to the internal organs. With the utmost care, the embalmers would begin the evisceration. You can imagine the delicate precision required, particularly given the tools they had at their disposal. The lungs, stomach, liver, and intestines were carefully removed. Each organ, as it was taken out, was meticulously cleaned and often placed in temporary containers, ready for the next stage of its journey. The canopic jars, which we'll delve into in more detail soon. Think of it as a divine organ harvest, but instead of for donation, it's for eternal storage. Historians still argue whether the embalmers possessed a rudimentary dissection of human anatomy from dissection, or if their knowledge was purely derived from the repeated practice of mummification. Was it empirical science, or was it simply a highly refined craft passed down through generations? You can almost hear the hushed debates in dusty university halls. Scholars poring over ancient texts and examining preserved remains for clues. Did they map out the circulatory system? Did they understand the function of each organ beyond its symbolic role? It's a fascinating question, hinting at the true depth of their scientific inquiry, or perhaps their masterful trial-landerer approach. Whatever the answer, their results speak for themselves. As you stand there, the air becoming heavier with the sense of preparation, you can feel the weight of centuries of belief, of unwavering faith in the journey that lies beyond. This wasn't just about preventing decay. It was about ensuring a flawless transition, a seamless passage from one existence to the next. Every cut, every wash, every prayer was a step on that path, a meticulously choreographed dance with eternity. The silence inside the tent is punctuated only by the soft sounds of work, a gentle rhythm that promises not an end, but a beginning. And you, a silent witness from a distant future, are privileged to behold the first crucial moments of this extraordinary ancient ritual for achieving eternal sleep. The preparations are underway, the body laid bare, and the sacred work has truly commenced. The initial incision has been made, the portal opened, and now the meticulous, almost surgical, work of internal organ removal begins. You remain a silent observer in this shaded tent, the air still thick with those heady, sweet, spicy resins, a constant reminder of the purpose at hand. The embalmers, their movements precise and practiced, carefully extract the vital organs one by one. It's a delicate dance, a morbid ballet as they reach deep into the abdominal cavity. You watch as the lungs are gently lifted, the stomach carefully detached, the liver, that large, dark organ, gingerly removed, and finally, the coiled mass of the intestines. Each organ, as it comes forth, is a testament to the life that once animated this vessel. You might be thinking, gross, and yes, from a modern, squeamish perspective, it certainly is. But for the ancient Egyptians, this was not a desecration. It was a necessary act of purification, an essential step in preparing the body for its journey to the field of reeds. These organs, though vital in life, were seen as prone to decay, and decay was the ultimate enemy of eternal slumber. If the body wasn't preserved, the Ka and Ba wouldn't have a place to return to, and the deceased would be condemned to a rather eternal state of non-existence. Imagine planning an epic road trip, but then realizing your car is slowly dissolving into rust. Not ideal. A mainstream historical fact. The 4 primary organs removed, the lungs, stomach, liver, and intestines, were not simply discarded. Oh no, they were carefully preserved and placed into what are known as canopic jars. These jars were incredibly important, serving as the sacred receptacles for these internal vital parts. ensuring their continued integrity for the afterlife. Each jar was dedicated to one of the 4 sons of Horus, who served as protective deities, guarding these precious contents. It's like having bespoke, divine Tupperware for your inner workings. Here's a quirky or fringe tidbit, though. While the general practice of putting these specific organs into canopic jars was consistent, there were occasional variations, particularly in earlier periods. Sometimes, smaller, less significant organs might also be placed in rudimentary containers, or even just bundled with linen and natron inside the body cavity itself. If jars weren't available, or if the mummification was less elaborate, it suggests a degree of adaptability in their rituals, proving that even in death, there's always room for a little improvisation. Necessity, after all, is the mother of embalming invention. The process of cleaning these removed organs is fascinating. They weren't just plopped into jars immediately. Each organ was meticulously washed, often with palm wine and spices, to further cleanse them and halt decomposition. Imagine the scene: skilled workers, perhaps apprentices, carefully cleaning the slippery surfaces, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. It was a very hands-on, visceral job, certainly not for the faint of heart. Pun absolutely intended. The smell, even with the masking resins, would have been, shall we say, memorable. Probably not the kind of job you'd advertise on a help wanted papyrus today. Let's talk about the canopic jars themselves for a moment. You see them now being prepared. There would be 4 of them, typically made of alabaster, limestone, pottery, or sometimes even wood, each with a distinctive lid representing one of the 4 sons of Horus, Imsidi, with a human head protected. The liver, Hapy, with a baboon head, guarded the lungs. Duamutef, with a jackal head, protected the stomach. Kebesanuf, with a falcon head, safeguarded the intestines. These weren't just pretty containers. They were miniature spiritual fortresses, ensuring that each vital organ was under divine protection, ready to be reunited with the body in the afterlife. The belief was that for the deceased to be truly whole and resurrected, all their parts, internal and external, needed to be accounted for and preserved. It's like ensuring all the pieces of a complex jigsaw puzzle are present. Before you can complete the picture of eternal life, historians still argue whether the specific choice of animal head for each god was purely symbolic, or if it somehow related to the perceived nature or function of the organ they protected. Was the baboon, with its loud cries, associated with the breath of the lungs? Did the jackal, a scavenger, somehow relate to the digestive process of the stomach? Or was it simply an artistic convention that evolved over centuries? The debates continue, adding layers of intriguing complexity to these seemingly straightforward religious symbols. It reminds you that even the most seemingly obvious ancient practices often hide depths of meaning that we are still trying to fully grasp. Once cleaned and dried, the organs would be carefully wrapped in linen bandages, sometimes individually, sometimes in small bundles. This wrapping further aided in their preservation, akin to modern-day food wrapping for freezer storage, but with far grander aspirations than simply keeping your leftovers fresh. These wrapped organs were then placed gently into their respective canopic jars. The lids, representing the watchful sons of Horus, would be sealed, creating a mini mummy for each organ. You can almost feel the reverence in the air as each jar is filled. This isn't just a job, it's a profound act of faith. The embalmers, often priests themselves, understood the spiritual weight of their actions. They were literally preparing someone for eternity, for an existence among the gods. The precision, the care, the adherence to ritual, it all stemmed from this deep-seated belief in the journey ahead. They were not simply preserving flesh, they were ensuring the integrity of a soul's passport to paradise. The interior of the body cavity, now empty of its major organs, also needed attention. It wasn't just left hollow, it would be thoroughly cleaned again with more palm wine and fragrant spices. Then it would often be packed with temporary stuffing materials. Sometimes this stuffing consisted of linen bandages soaked in resins, or even bundles of natron, the powerful drying salt. Later, once the main desiccation process was complete, this temporary stuffing would be removed and replaced with more permanent materials like linen, sawdust, or even aromatic substances like myrrh and frankincense to help retain the body's shape and add a pleasant scent for its long rest. It's like giving the inside of a doll a good clean and then filling it with potpourri and cotton stuffing. Practical and pleasant. The precision with which they worked, despite not having modern medical knowledge, is truly astonishing. They understood that internal moisture was the enemy of preservation, and they employed every technique at their disposal to eliminate it. The removal of the organs was the first major step in this desiccation process, setting the stage for the powerful effects of natron. You can almost see the remaining moisture wicking away, the skin beginning its slow transformation from pliable to firm. The chief embalmer supervises every step, his gaze unwavering, his hands occasionally gesturing, guiding his assistants. There's a sense of purpose and a quiet dignity to the entire operation. This wasn't a rushed, frantic affair, but a carefully choreographed ritual. Each movement imbued with meaning, each substance chosen for its specific properties, both physical and spiritual. The air in the tent might be heavy with the scent of resins, but it's also charged with the solemnity of preparing a soul for its ultimate destiny. Duat as the last canopic jar is filled and sealed. You get a profound sense of the Egyptians' dedication to this process. It wasn't just about the grand tombs or the golden masks. It was about the meticulous, often unseen work that went into every fiber of the deceased's being. The external splendor was merely a reflection of the internal preservation, a visible testament to an invisible journey. The stage is now set for the next critical phase, the long, slow drying process that will transform flesh into something capable of withstanding the ravages of time, ensuring that the deceased achieves their eternal sleep. The organs are secure, the body cavity prepared, and the powerful forces of preservation are about to be unleashed. With the internal organs safely tucked away in their canopic jars, the focus now shifts to the most delicate part of the operation, at least from a modern perspective. You're still in the embalming tent, the air still thick with the sweet, masking scent of resins, and the quiet, rhythmic sounds of the embalmers at work. The body, now a hollowed vessel, lies on the slanted table, ready for the next phase. This is where we confront the brain, and as mentioned earlier, for all their wisdom and medical insight, the ancient Egyptians really didn't think much of it. A mainstream historical fact is that they believed the heart, not the brain, was the center of consciousness, emotion, and intellect. So, while the heart stayed, the brain was considered, frankly, expendable. A bit of a dismissal, really, for the organ that allows us to ponder such profound things as ancient embalming rituals. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, because they didn't value the brain, its removal was often done with surprisingly crude, if effective, methods. You won't see any neurosurgeons with tiny scalpels here. Instead, you'll witness a process that might make you wince, even from across the millennia. The most common method, and one you're about to observe, involved a long, thin, hooked instrument, often made of bronze, sometimes iron, that looked a bit like a medieval knitting needle, or perhaps a rather aggressive nasal probe. This instrument would be inserted up through the nostrils, piercing the ethmoid bone, a surprisingly thin bone that separates the brain from the nasal cavity. Imagine the skill, or perhaps the sheer audacity, required to perform this. The embalmer, often a specialist in this particular, rather unpleasant task, would carefully but firmly insert the hook. You can almost feel the uncomfortable sensation as it slides upward, navigating the delicate nasal passages. Once through the ethmoid bone, the hook would be twirled and agitated, effectively liquefying the brain matter. Yes, you heard that right. Liquefying. It's not a gentle scooping. It's more like a vigorous stirring to turn the gray matter into a manageable slurry. It's certainly one way to clear your head, though perhaps a tad too permanent. The next step, once the brain had been thoroughly agitated, was to drain it. The body would be tilted, sometimes even turned on its side, allowing the liquefied brain matter to flow out through the nostrils. You might see workers assisting, perhaps gently pressing on the skull to encourage the drainage. It's a messy business, to say the least, and certainly not for those with a weak stomach. The remnants might be rinsed out with water, again poured into the nasal cavity to ensure as much as possible was removed. The goal was to leave the cranial cavity as empty as possible, preventing any internal decomposition that might compromise the entire preservation process. It's a surprisingly efficient, if brutal, method for getting rid of something they considered utterly unnecessary. Historians still argue whether this method was universally applied, or if other techniques, perhaps involving direct access through the skull, were occasionally used, while the nasal route seems to have been the most common. Archaeological evidence sometimes hints at more direct, though rare, cranial incisions. Was this due to different schools of embalming thought, or simply adaptations for particular circumstances or states of the body? The precise variations in technique and their prevalence remain a topic of scholarly debate, suggesting that even in such a rigid ritual, there was room for some individual variation or evolving practice. You can almost hear the soft, squishing sound as the instruments work, a faint, metallic scraping against bone. It's a sound that's hard to reconcile with the solemnity of the overall ritual, but it speaks to the pragmatism of the embalmers. They had a job to do, a critical step in the grand plan of eternal life, and they weren't going to let something as minor as delicacy get in the way. After all, once the Ba and Ka had departed, what use was a squishy, perishable brain? Its purpose was fulfilled. Now it was just a liability. Occasionally, if the deceased was of particular importance, or if the process was less hurried, some embalmers might have attempted a more refined approach, perhaps using resin to help solidify the remaining brain matter, or packing the cavity with linen. But generally, the goal was extraction and elimination. The empty skull was then often rinsed and, in some cases, filled with resin-soaked linen, or even packed with myrrh or other aromatic substances. This helped to maintain the shape of the head and further prevent any lingering decay. It's like sealing off a room to prevent drafts. But for your consciousness, the removal of the brain highlights a fascinating dichotomy in ancient Egyptian beliefs. Their incredible reverence for the body as a vessel for eternity, coupled with a surprising lack of understanding, or perhaps just a disregard for the physiological functions that we now consider paramount. They understood decay, they understood preservation, and they understood ritual, but the intricate dance of neurons and synapses, not so much on their radar. It makes you wonder how differently our understanding of the afterlife might have evolved. If they'd thought the brain was the key, we might have had mummified brains in tiny, gilded jars, rather than hearts. The tools themselves, you observe, are not elaborate. Simple, effective, and sometimes quite crude. This highlights the ingenuity of the ancient Egyptians, working with the materials at hand to achieve remarkable results. They didn't have precision drills or suction devices. They had a metal hook, perseverance, and a deep understanding of what needed to be done. It's a testament to their dedication to the craft and the sheer importance they placed on the successful completion of the mummification process. As the last vestiges of brain matter are drained and the nasal cavity is perhaps given a final rinse, there's a subtle shift in the air. A phase is complete. The head, once the seat of life's immediate thoughts and perceptions, is now an empty chamber, ready for its long sleep. The initial invasive steps of the embalming process, the opening of the body, the removal of the major organs, and now the evacuation of the brain are largely complete. The body has been prepared, stripped of its most perishable internal components, and purified. You can almost feel the dryness beginning to set in, a subtle tightening of the skin. The air, though still scented, carries a faint, earthy undertone. Now, the smell of the human body beginning its transformation. The sun outside continues its relentless beat, but inside this tent, a quiet, profound metamorphosis is underway. The vessel is almost ready for its next, most crucial step, the long, slow drying process that will truly transform it into a mummy. The stage is perfectly set for the powerful, desiccating properties of Natron to begin their work, ensuring that this body, though now empty, will endure for millennia, a testament to a people who believed that eternal sleep was not just a dream, but an achievable reality. The brain is gone, the organs are jarred, and the body, now a meticulously prepared canvas, awaits the touch of the desert's own magic. With the brain unceremoniously removed and the major organs safely ensconced in their canopic jars, the focus now shifts entirely to these sacred vessels. You're still within the hushed sanctity of the embalming tent, the air a dense tapestry of myrrh and the lingering, almost metallic tang of preservation. The body, now cleansed and hollowed, lies waiting for its long bath in Natron. But first, the focus is squarely on the 4 protective deities and the precious cargo they guard. A mainstream historical fact you should remember about the canopic jars is that they were not merely storage containers. They were deeply symbolic. each one intricately linked to a specific god, one of the four sons of Horus. These deities were not minor players in the Egyptian pantheon. They were crucial guardians of the deceased's internal essences, ensuring that these vital parts would be present and functional in the afterlife. Imagine them as a divine security detail, each with their own specialized portfolio, making sure no essential part gets lost in the cosmic shuffle. You watch as the embalmers, or perhaps the priests themselves, approach the four filled jars. Each jar, whether carved from gleaming alabaster, sturdy limestone, humble pottery, or even finely worked wood, stands as a testament to the importance of its contents. Their lids, sculpted into the distinctive heads of Imsiti, Hapi, Duamutef, and Kebasanuf, face outward, seemingly watchful, their silent gazes fixed on eternity. Let's refresh your memory of who guards what, because it's not just random. Imsiti, with his human head, is the guardian of the liver. The liver, a crucial organ in life for detoxification and metabolism, was perhaps seen as representing the person's vital essence or spiritual health. Hapi, depicted with the head of a baboon, protects the lungs. The lungs, obviously, are the instruments of breath, of life itself, and the baboon's often vocal and lively nature might have made it a fitting symbol for this essential, breathing aspect of existence. Duamutef, the jackal-headed deity, watches over the stomach. The jackal, a creature often associated with deserts and scavenging, perhaps symbolized the breaking down and processing of sustenance, linking it to the digestive functions of the stomach. And finally, Kebasanuf, with his fierce falcon head, safeguards the intestines. The falcon, a bird of prey, often soared high above, observing. Perhaps this was linked to the complex, winding nature of the intestines, requiring a keen eye to navigate. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit regarding these jars, while the four standard sons of Horus were almost always depicted in very early periods of mummification, before the iconography became rigidly standardized, the internal organs might sometimes simply be wrapped and placed back inside the body, or, in some cases, placed in simple chest-like containers rather than individual anthropomorphic jars. The evolution to the distinct canopic jars, with their divine protectors, shows a refinement of the ritual over centuries, reflecting a growing complexity in their understanding of the afterlife and the precise needs for eternal existence. It's like their afterlife technology got an upgrade over time, moving from a basic storage box to a finely crafted, divinely protected vault system. You observe the meticulous care taken with each jar. They are not merely set aside, they are often arranged in a specific order, perhaps aligned with cardinal directions, or positioned in relation to the mummy itself, once it is prepared. This precise placement underscores their spiritual significance. They are not just containers, they are active participants in the journey of the deceased, ensuring that the soul has all its component parts ready for reunion in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that without these organs, the deceased would be incomplete, unable to function fully in the field of reeds. It would be like trying to assemble a high-end furniture set, only to realize half the screws are missing. Frustrating, and ultimately non-functional. Historians still argue whether the concept of the four sons of Horus, specifically as guardians of these organs evolved gradually, or was a more sudden theological innovation? Was there an earlier, less personified belief about organ preservation that later became integrated with the Horus mythos? Or were these deities always intrinsically linked to the physical body and its components from the very beginning of the detailed mummification practice? The precise genesis of this iconic quartet as organ guardians remains a topic of fascinating academic discussion, hinting at the fluidity and development of religious beliefs over millennia. The quality of the jars themselves could vary wildly, reflecting the social status and wealth of the deceased. A pharaoh or high-ranking noble might have exquisite alabaster jars, perfectly carved and polished, perhaps even inlaid with semi-precious stones. A commoner, if mummified at all, might have had simple, undecorated pottery jars. Yet, regardless of the material, the spiritual purpose remained the same. It's a powerful reminder that while earthly wealth dictated the grandeur of the vessels, the divine protection offered by the sons of Horus was, theoretically, available to all who underwent the ritual. Democracy in the afterlife, perhaps. As you watch the priests handle these jars, you can almost hear the whispered prayers, the incantations that would have accompanied their placement. Each prayer would invoke the specific deity, asking for their protection over the organ within, ensuring its integrity and its readiness for the reunion with the body. These were not just empty words. They were believed to be powerful, magical formulae, weaving a protective shroud around the vital essences. The sealing of the jars was a final, critical act. Once the organs were within and the lids placed, they would often be sealed with resin or plaster, a physical manifestation of the spiritual protection. This wasn't just to keep dust out. It was to keep the divine protection in, to ensure that the sacred contents remained undisturbed until the moment of resurrection. The whole process was a monumental act of faith, a profound commitment to preparing for an existence that to our modern eyes remains an unproven hypothesis. Think for a moment about the logistics of this. The embalmers are working in the heat, often for days or weeks, handling not just the body, but also these precious jars and their contents. The organizational skill alone is impressive, ensuring that the right organ goes into the right jar, that the prayers are correct, and that everything is ready for the next stage. It speaks to a highly specialized workforce, individuals dedicated to their craft and deeply imbued with the religious beliefs that underpinned their every action. The canopic jars weren't typically buried alongside the mummy in the same chamber. In a haphazard way, they often had their own niche within the tomb, or were placed in a special canopic chest, sometimes decorated with images of the very gods whose heads adorned the jars. This further elevated their status, placing them in their own dedicated sacred space within the larger tomb complex. It's like having a special, climate-controlled vault for your most priceless possessions. The quiet reverence in the tent, as these jars are handled, is palpable. There's no rush, no carelessness. Every movement is deliberate, every placement precise. The embalmers understand the cosmic weight of their task. They are not just preparing a body, they are ensuring the conditions for a soul's eternal journey. The canopic jars are the silent sentinels of this journey, guarding the precious fragments of life that will, one day, be reassembled for immortality. As the final jar is settled into its place, you feel the subtle shift. The internal preparation is complete. The deceased's essence has been meticulously separated, preserved, and divinely protected. Now, the body itself, having been emptied and cleansed, is ready for its long, transformative bath. The dry, hot, desert air, which will soon become the mummy's best friend, seems to hum with anticipation. The stage is perfectly set for the powerful, desiccating properties of natron, the true cornerstone of ancient Egyptian mummification, to begin its work, turning the perishable into the perpetual, and ensuring the grand ritual for achieving eternal. Sleep continues its inexorable march towards everlasting life. The guardians are in place, the organs are secure, and the body awaits its desiccation. With the internal organs safely enshrined within their canopic jars, resting under the watchful gaze of the 4 sons of Horus, the attention of the embalmers turns entirely to the body itself. You're still there, a silent observer in the sweltering, sweet-scented tent, feeling the relentless heat of the ancient Egyptian sun even through the protective layers of linen and palm frond. The body, now cleansed and hallowed, lies on the slanted embalming table, awaiting the most crucial step in its long transformation, desiccation. This is where the magic of natron comes into play, a mainstream historical fact you absolutely need to grasp about ancient Egyptian mummification is the paramount role of natron. This isn't just any salt. It's a naturally occurring mineral compound, primarily sodium carbonate dehydrate, with traces of sodium bicarbonate, sodium chloride, and sodium sulfate. It was found abundantly in dry lake beds, particularly in the Wadi Natron in Egypt. Think of it as nature's ultimate dehydrator, a miraculous substance that allowed the Egyptians to essentially freeze-dry a body without the need for actual freezing. Its power lay in its incredible hygroscopic properties, its ability to absorb water and fat, thoroughly drying out the tissues and preventing decomposition. Without natron, the entire elaborate ritual would have been, well, just a very messy affair with no lasting results. You watch as large baskets of granular natron are brought into the tent. The substance itself looks like coarse, grayish-white crystals, almost like oversized sugar or fine sand. It feels slightly abrasive, powdery, and yet somehow cool to the touch. The air now takes on a subtly different scent, a mineral temps beginning to blend with the myrrh and spices, hinting at the powerful chemical reactions about to take place. The process is deceptively simple in its execution, yet profound in its effect. The embalmers begin by carefully packing the body cavity with large bags or bundles of natron. Remember that hollow space where the organs used to be. This is where the bulk of the natron goes, working from the inside out to draw out any residual moisture from the deeper tissues. They stuff it in, ensuring every nook and cranny is filled. A true internal desiccation. Imagine filling a giant, human-shaped sponge with super-absorbent crystals. Then, with methodical precision, the entire exterior of the body is completely covered in a thick layer of dry natron. You see the workers, their hands probably protected by thick cloths, carefully scooping handfuls of the crystalline substance and pouring it over every inch of the deceased. The face, the limbs, the torso, nothing is left exposed. The body literally disappears beneath a shimmering, grayish mound of natron. It's like burying the deceased in a very specific, very absorbent desert. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit. While Natron was the undisputed champion of desiccation, there's evidence that in some cases, especially in earlier, less developed mummification techniques, or for less affluent individuals, plain salt or even dry sand might have been used in conjunction with or as a substitute for natron. While less effective, these alternatives highlight the Egyptians' experimental approach to preservation and their relentless pursuit of methods to cheat decay. It's like trying to make a gourmet meal with only half the ingredients. You might get something edible, but it won't be quite the same. The body would remain encased in this bed of natron for approximately 35 to 40 days, roughly half of the total 70-day mummification process. This duration was critical. Too short, and the body wouldn't be fully desiccated, leaving it vulnerable to decomposition. Too long, and it could become overly brittle, almost like jerky, making the subsequent wrapping process difficult. It was a delicate balance, an ancient chemical equation that they seem to have mastered through centuries of trial and error. During this period, the natron would be replaced periodically, perhaps every few days, as it absorbed moisture and became saturated. You can envision the heavy, damp bundles being removed, replaced with fresh, dry natron, the air filling with an even stronger, almost dusty mineral smell. The discarded natron, heavy with the extracted fluids, would likely be disposed of carefully, perhaps buried or consecrated, as it was now imbued with the essence of the deceased. Historians still argue whether the precise chemical properties of natron, beyond its drying capabilities, were fully understood by the ancient Egyptians. Did they grasp the concept of pH or alkalinity, or was their understanding purely empirical, based on observed results over thousands of bodies? The debate highlights the line between ancient craft and nascent science, prompting questions about the depth of their scientific inquiry versus their mastery of practical application through sheer repetition and meticulous observation. As the days turn into weeks, you would notice a profound transformation in the body. The skin, initially soft and pliable, would become tough and leathery, almost like parchment. The features, though still recognizable, would become sharper, more defined as the underlying tissues contracted. The body would visibly shrink, losing a significant amount of its original weight. It's a slow, steady metamorphosis from the ephemeral to the enduring. The color of the skin would also change, often darkening to a reddish-brown hue. It was a visible sign that the forces of decay had been arrested, that the body was truly entering a state of eternal sleep. The embalmers would monitor this process closely, perhaps checking the dryness of the skin, or tapping on the limbs to assess their consistency. This wasn't a passive waiting period. It was an active management of the desiccation, ensuring optimal results. The air in the tent, once heavy with the scent of organic decay and resin, now begins to smell drier, more mineral, more stable. It's the smell of suspended animation, of time being held at bay. The natron served a dual purpose. Not only did it dry the body, but its alkaline nature also acted as a strong antiseptic, preventing bacterial growth that would lead to putrefaction. This combination of dehydration and sterilization was the secret sauce, the reason why Egyptian mummies have endured for thousands of years, far outlasting any other form of ancient body preservation. It was a testament to their profound understanding of decay. Even without microscopes or petri dishes, you can almost hear the soft, almost imperceptible whisper of countless water molecules escaping the body, drawn inexorably into the hungry crystals of Natron. It's a silent, chemical ballet playing out over weeks, transforming the very essence of the human form. The body, once full of the ephemeral fluids of life, is now becoming a hardened shell, a durable vessel for the Ka and Ba to revisit. This long period of desiccation underscores the incredible dedication and patience of the ancient Egyptians. Mummification wasn't a quick fix. It was a multi-stage process requiring immense resources, specialized knowledge, and a deep, abiding faith in the afterlife. The Natron stage was the longest and arguably the most critical, laying the groundwork for all the subsequent steps, from anointing to wrapping. As the approximately 40 days draw to a close, the embalmers begin the careful process of removing the natron. The crystalline substance, now saturated and discolored, is brushed away, revealing the transformed body beneath. It's lighter, drier, and remarkably well preserved. The skin, once vibrant with life, is now a testament to time's arrest. A leathery, almost immortal canvas. The body has successfully navigated its most vulnerable phase, emerging from its mineral bath, ready for the next set of rituals. The promise of eternal sleep, once a distant hope, now feels tangibly closer, etched into the very fibers of the desiccated form. The natron has done its work, and the mummy, in its rawest form, is ready for its anointing and adornment. The long, dehydrating embrace of natron has ended. You remain in the embalming tent, though the air now feels considerably drier, less heavy with the initial potent sense of decay and masking resins. The vast mound of natron that once enveloped the body has been carefully brushed away, revealing the transformed deceased beneath. The skin, once soft and supple, is now taut, leathery, and dark, a testament to the powerful desiccating properties of the mineral. The body is lighter, firmer, and remarkably preserved, ready for the next crucial phase of its journey towards eternal sleep, the application of oils, resins, and, most importantly, the placement of amulets and adornments. A mainstream historical fact about this stage is that after desiccation, the body underwent an extensive anointing process. This wasn't just for pleasant aesthetics or to counteract the dryness from the natron. It was a deeply ritualistic act. The body would be washed again, this time with water and fragrant oils. Then it would be painstakingly coated with various resins and unguents. These included cedar oil, frankincense, myrrh, and a range of other aromatic tree resins. These substances served multiple purposes. They helped to restore some suppleness to the leathery skin, acted as further preservatives with their antibacterial and antifungal properties, and, crucially, imbued the body with a sacred, almost divine, fragrance, preparing it for its interaction with the gods. It's like a spiritual spa treatment, ensuring the deceased smells utterly divine for their grand entrance. You observe the embalmers, their hands now gloved or wrapped in linen, carefully applying these precious substances. The resins, thick and viscous, would be warmed slightly to make them easier to work with. They would rub them into every inch of the body, a slow, methodical process that could take hours. The air fills with a richer, more complex aroma. Now the deep, woody notes of cedar, the balsamic sweetness of myrrh, the sharp, clean scent of frankincense. It's a perfume of eternity, designed to please the gods and ward off any lingering, malefic forces. Imagine trying to get all those sticky resins evenly distributed without getting them everywhere. It certainly wasn't a job for the clumsy, but beyond the anointing, this stage is critically about the spiritual protection of the deceased through the placement of amulets. These aren't just trinkets, they are powerful, magical objects, each with a specific purpose, designed to protect the mummy from harm, guide it through the perils of the Duat, the underworld, and ensure its successful rebirth in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that death was fraught with dangers, demons, traps, and tests. Amulets were their spiritual safety net, their cosmic good luck charms. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, while many amulets were meticulously placed between the layers of linen, bandages during the wrapping process, which we'll get to next, some crucial ones were often placed on or in the body itself, particularly in the chest cavity or on specific limbs, before the wrapping began. For instance, sometimes a small false heart amulet, usually a scarab, would be placed directly over the chest, just in case the real heart was somehow compromised or deemed impure during the weighing ceremony. It's like having a backup or a cheat sheet for your soul's final exam. You see a variety of these amulets now being brought forward. They are made from various materials: carnelian, lapis lazuli, obsidian, gold, faience, and even wood. Each material and each shape had its own specific magical properties and symbolism. Let's look at some of the most common and significant amulets. You might observe the scarab beetle. This is perhaps the most iconic Egyptian amulet, often carved from green stone or faience. The scarab symbolized rebirth and regeneration, mimicking the beetle's habit of pushing a ball of dung representing the sun across the ground. The most important scarab was the heart scarab, often inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead, chapter 30b, which prevented the heart from testifying against the deceased during the weighing of the heart ceremony. This was often placed directly over the heart, either on the chest or even inside the chest cavity if it was packed with internal stuffing. It's the ultimate take, the fifth card for your soul, the ankh, the symbol of life itself, often made of faience or gold. The ankh was placed to bestow eternal life upon the deceased. Its distinctive looped cross shape is instantly recognizable, a powerful invocation of vitality and endless existence. The jed pillar, resembling a stylized human backbone. The jed pillar symbolized stability, durability, and the backbone of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. It was often placed near the spine to give strength and endurance to the deceased in the underworld. The Tayat Isis knot, also known as the knot of Isis. This amulet resembles a looped piece of cloth and symbolized protection, welfare, and the magical power of the goddess Isis. It was often made of red materials like carnelian, evoking the protective blood of Isis. The uraeus, the rearing cobra, often depicted on the brow of pharaohs, symbolized royal power, divine authority, and protection against evil. A small uraeus amulet might be placed near the head or within the head wrappings. The two fingers. This peculiar amulet, depicting two fingers, was typically made of obsidian or hematite. It was placed near the incision on the body, symbolizing the two fingers of the embalmer, ensuring that the incision would miraculously close in the afterlife, making the body whole again. It's like a spiritual suture, sealing the body for eternity. Historians still argue whether the precise number and placement of certain amulets followed an absolutely rigid formula for all individuals, or if there was some flexibility based on the embalmer's discretion, the deceased's specific needs, or their personal beliefs. Was there a standard amulet package, or was it a bespoke spiritual service? The archaeological record shows variations, fueling the scholarly debate on the interplay between ritual conformity and individual customization in ancient Egyptian funerary practices. You watch as these precious objects are brought forward, each imbued with centuries of belief and magical power. The embalmers, or perhaps priests, would carefully position them on the body, sometimes securing them with a dab of resin or a simple linen tie. Every placement is deliberate, every amulet a silent prayer, a tangible plea for divine intervention and protection. The gold gleams softly in the subdued light of the tent. The lapis lazuli shines with a deep cosmic blue. The carnelian glows with an earthy warmth. The sheer volume of amulets could be staggering. For a wealthy individual, dozens, even hundreds, might be placed within the wrappings, sometimes layer upon layer. Each bandage, each fold of linen, could conceal a tiny guardian, a silent protector for the long journey. This layering of protection speaks volumes about the Egyptians' belief in the dangers of the afterlife and their determination to equip the deceased with every possible advantage. It's like sending someone on a perilous expedition, armed with every possible gadget and safety device imaginable. This period of anointing and adorning is crucial for setting the mummy's external appearance and for imbuing it with its final, mystical protections before the wrapping begins. The resins not only preserve, but also create a pliable, somewhat sticky surface, perfect for holding the initial layers of linen and the smaller amulets in place. The body, once a withered husk, begins to take on a more finished appearance, albeit a rather dark and leathery one. As the last of the resins are applied and the initial, most vital amulets are placed directly on the body, a quiet transformation settles over the scene. The body is no longer just a preserved corpse. It is becoming a consecrated vessel, a sacred object, ready for its final, painstaking transformation. The air is now thick with the scent of purification and ancient magic, a prelude to the endless layers of linen that await. The amulets glint, silent promises of protection, and the body, now anointed and adorned, stands ready for the labyrinthine embrace of the bandages. The path to eternal slumber is ever clearer, wrapped in magic and meticulous care. The body, now thoroughly desiccated and anointed with precious resins, its most vital areas adorned with protective amulets, lies ready. You remain a silent witness amidst the hushed industry of the embalming tent in ancient Egypt. The air, once heavy with the scent of decay and now permeated by the rich, complex aromas of myrrh, frankincense, and cedar, takes on a new quality, the dry, faint, almost dusty smell of vast quantities of linen. This is the stage where the true artistry and painstaking patience of the embalmers become most apparent. The wrapping, a mainstream historical fact about mummification is that the process of wrapping the body in linen bandages was incredibly elaborate, meticulous, and time-consuming. It wasn't just about covering the body. It was a complex ritual involving hundreds of meters, sometimes even kilometers, of specially prepared linen. Each strip was applied with precision, often accompanied by prayers and spells, creating a protective cocoon for the deceased's eternal journey. Imagine wrapping a gift, but instead of paper, it's endless strips of cloth, and the gift is eternity. You watch as the process begins. The linen itself comes in various qualities and widths. Some are fine and translucent, almost gossamer-like, while others are coarser, more akin to modern-day canvas. They are often torn or cut from old household linens, indicating that even humble fabrics could be repurposed for the sacred task. The strips vary from a few centimeters wide to broader sheets. The embalmers would have a vast supply at hand, neatly folded or rolled, ready for deployment. The wrapping typically began with the extremities. Fingers and toes were often wrapped individually, sometimes with tiny amulets or finger stalls of gold or silver placed over them. This meticulous attention to detail ensured that even the smallest parts of the body were preserved and recognized in the afterlife. It's like ensuring every last component of a complex machine is perfectly insulated for a long voyage. Then, each limb would be wrapped separately from the tips of the fingers and toes up towards the torso. The strips would be applied in crisscrossing patterns, layer upon layer, sometimes soaked in warmed resin to help them adhere and to provide additional preservation. This creates a dense, protective shell, guarding against both physical damage and spiritual impurities. You can almost feel the sticky warmth of the resin as the layers are applied, slowly encasing the limbs in a rigid embrace. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, while the overall method of wrapping was consistent, the exact pattern of wrapping could vary significantly, not just between different eras, but sometimes even between different embalming workshops. Some favored diagonal wraps, others more circular. There's even evidence of highly elaborate, decorative patterns, almost like bespoke tailoring for the deceased. This subtle variation in technique might indicate different schools of embalming, each with its own preferred aesthetic or theological interpretation of how best to cocoon the body for eternity. It's like having different fashion trends for your posthumous attire. As the limbs are encased, the torso and head would be addressed. The head, often wrapped with particular care, might have specific folds of linen designed to maintain its shape and features. Layers would build up around the skull, creating a distinct, almost mask-like appearance. Even before any actual mask was applied, the eye sockets might be filled with linen pads or even small onions, a symbol of eternity, to help maintain the facial contours. Throughout this extensive process, amulets would be strategically placed between the layers of linen. We touched on this in the previous section, but now you see it in action. A heart scarab might be placed over the chest after a few initial layers of linen. A jed pillar amulet could be tucked along the spine as the back is wrapped. Tayet, or Isis knots, symbolizing protection, might be scattered throughout the layers. Each amulet, often inscribed with a specific magical spell or prayer, served to reinforce the protective barrier of the linen and provide spiritual guidance. It's like adding software patches to a vital operating system, each one enhancing security and functionality. Historians still argue whether the placement of every single amulet was precisely dictated by a religious text, or if embalmers had some latitude to include additional protective charms based on perceived threats or the deceased's personal characteristics. Was there a strict checklist, or more of a general guideline? The sheer variety found in archaeological discoveries suggests a blend of both, making the study of mummy wrappings an ongoing puzzle for scholars trying to decipher the nuances of ancient Egyptian belief and practice. The sheer volume of linen used is staggering. It's estimated that a single mummy could require hundreds of square meters of linen, torn into countless strips. Imagine the logistics of gathering, cleaning, and preparing all that cloth. It speaks volumes about the resources dedicated to funerary practices, underscoring the central importance of the afterlife in Egyptian society. They were literally investing their earthly wealth in their eternal future. As the layers accumulate, the body begins to lose its human form, transforming into a rigid, almost cylindrical shape. The careful tension applied during wrapping ensures a tight, compact bundle. This rigidity provided structural integrity, protecting the fragile, desiccated body from damage over millennia. It's like creating a custom-fit, form-fitting sarcophagus out of fabric. Each layer of linen, each strip, could be coated with resin. This sticky, aromatic substance helped to fuse the layers together, creating a durable, almost impenetrable shell. The resin also continued the work of preservation, adding another layer of antibacterial and antifungal protection. The smell in the tent would be a potent mix of dry linen and the sweet, balsamic notes of the warmed resins, clinging to everything. The process of wrapping could take weeks, not just days, depending on the complexity and the status of the deceased. It was a painstaking, labor-intensive undertaking, requiring immense patience and highly skilled hands. Every knot, every tuck, every fold had a purpose, both practical and symbolic. You can feel the quiet focus of the embalmers, their rhythmic movements creating a meditative atmosphere. Sometimes a funerary shroud or a large sheet of decorated linen would be placed over the completed mummy, almost like a final blanket, before the body was placed in its coffin or sarcophagus. This shroud might depict images of gods, scenes from the Book of the Dead, or even a stylized representation of the deceased. It was the final outer garment for eternity, the finished mummy, encased in its countless layers of linen and imbued with its protective amulets, is no longer just a body. It has been transformed into a sacred object, a vessel ready for its long journey. The elaborate wrapping wasn't just practical. It was a symbolic rebirth, the deceased emerging from the cocoon of preparation as a perfected being, ready to navigate the dangers of the Duat and achieve eternal life. It's the ultimate form of personal packaging, ensuring freshness for thousands of years. As the last knots are tied and the final layers secured, you see the completed mummy, a tightly bound, rigid form, perhaps with an intricately wrapped face, or ready for a funerary mask. The immense effort, the sheer volume of material, and the profound belief invested in this process are almost overwhelming. The physical preparation is complete. The body is now a perfectly preserved shell, waiting for its spiritual instruction manual. And that, my friend, brings us to the next vital component of their quest for eternal slumber, the Book of the Dead, without which all this meticulous preservation might have been in vain. The linen has embraced its charge, and the mummy is ready for its spells. The mummy, now tightly encased in its countless layers of linen, anointed with fragrant resins, and studied with protective amulets, lies still. You're still in that sacred space, the embalming tent in ancient Egypt, the air a lingering symphony of myrrh, cedar, and the dry, clean scent of linen. The physical transformation of the body is complete, a testament to meticulous craftsmanship and profound belief. But a journey of such cosmic significance requires more than just a well-preserved vessel. It needs guidance, a map, and most importantly, the right passwords and spells. This is where the enduring legacy of the Book of the Dead enters our narrative. A mainstream historical fact you absolutely must grasp is that the Book of the Dead isn't a book in the modern sense, with a spine and pages you'd find on a shelf. Instead, it's a collection of funerary texts, spells, prayers, hymns, and magical formulae that were written on papyrus scrolls, linen shrouds, tomb walls, sarcophagi, and even directly on the bandages of the mummy itself. Its true title, translated from ancient Egyptian, is the Book of Coming Forth by Day, or the Chapters of Coming Forth by Day, which gives you a far better sense of its purpose, a guide to navigate the perilous journey through the Duat, into the afterlife, into the light. It was essentially the ultimate afterlife survival guide, complete with cheat codes for tricky situations. You can almost feel the weight of these scrolls, perhaps rolled tightly and placed near the mummy, or even laid directly on its chest. Imagine the scribe diligently copying the intricate hieroglyphs, often by flickering lamplight, each symbol imbued with power. The ink, made from carbon black for outlines and red ochre for rubrics, special instructions, or headings, would have been applied with reed pens, a slow, deliberate dance across the papyrus fibers. The spells within the Book of the Dead were designed to address every conceivable challenge the deceased might face. There were spells to give the deceased power over hostile demons, spells to ensure they wouldn't thirst or hunger, spells to allow them to remember their earthly name, crucial for identity in the afterlife, and even spells to allow them to transform into various animals, granting them different abilities or escape routes. It's like a comprehensive instruction manual for navigating a fantastical, dangerous dimension, complete with optional power-ups. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, while many copies of the Book of the Dead were highly personalized, containing spells chosen specifically for the deceased or their profession, some poorer individuals might have acquired mass-produced, generic versions, perhaps with blank spaces left for their name to be filled in. It's the ancient Egyptian equivalent of buying a pre-printed happy birthday card versus a custom-engraved invitation. This suggests a burgeoning industry around funerary goods, making the afterlife accessible even on a budget, albeit with less tailored spiritual protection. You might see an embalmer or priest now, perhaps unfurling a portion of a papyrus scroll, his lips silently moving as he recites a spell, reinforcing its power for the silent figure before him. The act of reading, of speaking the words aloud, was considered a vital part of imbuing the deceased with the magical knowledge contained. within the text. It wasn't enough to just have the spells. You had to know them, or at least have them recited for you, so the BA and KA could absorb their essence. Some of the most famous and crucial chapters include Spell 30B, the Heart Scarab spell. This incredibly important spell, often inscribed on the Heart Scarab amulet, prevented the deceased's heart from testifying against them during the weighing of the heart ceremony. It's the ultimate silence is golden spell. Spell 125, the Negative Confession. This is where the deceased declares their innocence before Osiris and the 42 divine judges, stating all the sins they haven't committed. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not caused pain. It's less a confession and more a detailed denial, showcasing their moral purity. Spells for transformations. These allowed the deceased to change into various forms: a phoenix for rebirth, a serpent for protection, a lotus for beauty, granting them mobility and power in the afterlife. Spells for opening the mouth. This ritual, performed on the mummy and its coffin, symbolically restored the senses: speech, sight, hearing, and smell, allowing the deceased to breathe, eat, and interact in the afterlife. Though not strictly in the Book of the Dead, the concepts are intertwined. Historians still argue whether the Book of the Dead served as a literal map for the deceased to follow, with each spell corresponding to a specific challenge or gate, or if it was more of a comprehensive spiritual arsenal, providing a general set of protections and affirmations for the journey. Was it a step-by-step guide through a geographical underworld, or a metaphorical toolkit for the soul? The debate reflects the complexity of interpreting ancient religious cosmology and its relationship to practical ritual. The inclusion of the Book of the Dead within the tomb, or even directly on the mummy, ensured that the deceased had immediate access to this vital information when they awoke in the Duat. Imagine waking up in a strange, dangerous new place without your phone or a map. The Book of the Dead was there. Ancient Egyptian smartphone, loaded with all the necessary apps for eternal survival. The quality and length of the papyrus scrolls varied immensely with the deceased's wealth. A pharaoh might have a magnificent scroll, dozens of meters long, richly illustrated with vibrant vignettes depicting the spells in action. A less affluent person might have a much shorter, simpler version, perhaps with fewer illustrations or less elaborate calligraphy. Yet the core purpose remained the same: to provide the necessary magical knowledge for the journey. You can almost feel the presence of the scribes and priests who dedicated their lives to transcribing and understanding these complex texts. They were the spiritual technicians of ancient Egypt, ensuring that the deceased had the best possible chance of achieving eternal bliss. Their work, though often unseen by later generations, was as crucial as that of the embalmers themselves. The relationship between the physical mummy and the spiritual guidance of the Book of the Dead is symbiotic. The mummy provided the physical anchor for the QA and BA to return to, while the Book of the Dead provided the spiritual roadmap for their perilous journey. One without the other would be incomplete. A body without spells would be lost. A book without a recipient body would be useless. It's a beautifully integrated system, a testament to the comprehensive nature of Egyptian funerary beliefs. As the final anointing oils are absorbed and the last protective amulets are secured within the layers of linen, the focus of the shifts. The physical preparation, down to the last binding, is now complete. The mummy, a triumph of preservation and ritual, now awaits its final resting place and its grand spiritual adventure. The silent spells of the Book of the Dead are its companions, its shield, and its compass. The stage is set for the ultimate journey, the perilous passage through the underworld, guided by these ancient, potent words. The physical body is prepared, and the spiritual map is at hand, ensuring the path to eternal slumber is well lit and well defended. The mummy, now a perfectly preserved and meticulously wrapped vessel, its outer layers gleaming with aromatic resins, and its inner sanctity protected by countless amulets and the silent power of the Book of the Dead, is ready. You're still an unseen presence in the embalming tent, though the air seems to vibrate now with a sense of culmination, a quiet anticipation. The long, painstaking work of physical preparation is complete. Now, the real journey begins. The perilous, fantastical voyage through the Duat, the ancient Egyptian underworld. A mainstream historical fact about the Duat is that it wasn't just a vague concept of an afterlife. It was a vividly imagined, often terrifying realm that the deceased had to navigate. It was filled with dangerous monsters, fiery lakes, treacherous rivers, and numerous gates, each guarded by fearsome deities and requiring specific passwords or spells to pass through. The Book of the Dead served precisely as this guidebook, providing the incantations and knowledge needed to overcome each obstacle. It's like a particularly harrowing video game, but with much higher stakes. You can almost feel the chill, the sudden shift from the dry, sun-baked air of Egypt to the dark, mysterious depths of the underworld. Imagine the deceased, stripped of their earthly body, but now reanimated in a spiritual form, stepping into this shadowy realm. The journey was traditionally thought to begin at sunset, mirroring the sun god Ra's nightly descent into the underworld before his rebirth at dawn. This cyclical journey of Ra was a powerful metaphor for the deceased's own hope of regeneration. The Duat was typically depicted as a subterranean realm beneath the earth, traversed by a winding river, much like the Nile. The deceased would often travel in a funerary boat, echoing the solar bark of Ra, pulled or propelled by various benevolent or sometimes malevolent entities. You can almost hear the soft lapping of unseen water against the hull, the distant, eerie cries of unknown creatures, and the constant, low hum of spiritual energy. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, while the general concept of the Duat was consistent, the precise geography and the number of gates or caverns varied significantly across different texts and time periods. Some versions describe 12 hours of the night, each representing a different region or trial, while others focus on specific caverns or judges. This fluidity suggests that while the overall purpose was clear, the specifics of the underworld were not always uniformly defined, allowing for various theological interpretations and perhaps even local folklore to influence the journey. It's like different editions of a fantasy novel, each with its own slightly altered map. As the deceased journeys through the Duat, they encounter a myriad of challenges. There are grotesque demons with knives for hands, giant serpents waiting to swallow, the unwary and scorching lakes of fire that test the purity of the soul. The spells from the Book of the Dead were crucial here. For instance, there were spells to ward off the crocodile demon who might snatch you from the river, or spells to avoid the net traps set by malevolent spirits. Without these protective incantations, the journey would be almost impossible, resulting in the second death, an eternal annihilation of the Ka and Ba. That's the kind of eternal sleep they definitely wanted to avoid. You might envision the deceased confidently reciting a spell, a magical shield shimmering into existence, deflecting a spectral arrow, or dissolving a ghostly obstacle. The Book of the Dead isn't just a passive guide, it's an active weapon, empowering the deceased to overcome the trials of the night. Historians still argue whether the terrifying imagery of the Duat was primarily intended to instill fear and enforce moral behavior in the living, or if it was genuinely believed to be a literal, perilous realm that required such meticulous preparation to traverse. Was it a theological scare tactic, or a direct reflection of their deepest spiritual anxieties about the unknown? The debate highlights the complex interplay between religious belief, societal control, and psychological comfort in ancient funerary practices. Beyond the external dangers, the deceased also faced internal trials. They had to prove their knowledge of sacred names and places, answering riddles posed by gatekeepers. They had to declare their moral righteousness in the presence of divine judges. This wasn't just about physical survival. It was about spiritual validation. The journey through the Duat was a profound test of character and knowledge, ensuring that only the truly worthy reached the blessed afterlife. One of the most profound aspects of the journey was the deceased's interaction with Osiris, the god of the underworld and resurrection. Osiris, who himself had overcome death, represented the hope of rebirth for all Egyptians. The deceased sought to become an Osiris, to identify with him, thereby sharing in his resurrection. This spiritual merger was the ultimate goal of the journey, moving beyond mere survival to actual divine transformation. The deceased also encountered other significant deities within the Duat, such as Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, who might record their deeds, and Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice, whose feather would be central to the ultimate judgment. These encounters weren't always hostile. Some gods were benevolent guides, offering assistance and protection to the worthy. You can almost feel the vastness of this underworld, stretching out in endless darkness, punctuated by flashes of light from celestial bodies or the glow of divine presence. The deceased is not alone, but they are utterly reliant on the knowledge and protections provided by their earthly preparations. Every prayer whispered during the embalming, every amulet placed, every spell copied onto the papyrus scroll, now comes to fruition, providing the necessary tools for navigating this mystical landscape. The journey through the Duat culminates for the successful in the weighing of the heart, the pivotal moment of judgment, which we will explore in detail next. But for now, understand that every step through this underworld, every monster vanquished, every riddle answered, every gate passed, was leading inevitably to that final, decisive trial. The Duat was not a destination, but a transformative passage, a crucible through which the soul was purified and tested, preparing it for its ultimate fate. The Egyptians believed that those who failed the trials of the Duat, those whose hearts were heavy with sin or who lacked the necessary knowledge, would suffer the second death, devoured by terrifying beasts like Ammit, the devourer of the dead, a monstrous hybrid of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus. This was the ultimate terror, an oblivion far worse than mere physical death, as it meant the complete cessation of existence, the inability to ever achieve eternal sleep in the field of reeds. It's like getting permanently banned from the internet, but for your soul, as the sun begins to rise in your mind's eye, marking the end of the night's perilous journey for the successful soul. You understand the immense significance of the Duat. It was a terrifying yet necessary rite of passage, a spiritual gauntlet designed to purify and prove the deceased's worthiness for eternal life. The mummy, now symbolically undertaking this journey, is a silent testament to the hopes and fears of an entire civilization, its very existence tied to the success of this cosmic voyage. The journey through the Duat is nearing its end, and the culmination awaits, the terrifying yet ultimately hopeful moment of judgment. The path has been traversed, and the soul now stands before the divine scales. The long, perilous journey through the Duat, the shadowy underworld, teeming with both terrors and divine guides, has reached its inevitable climax. The mummy, your symbolic charge, has navigated the spectral rivers, dodged the monstrous denizens, and recited the necessary spells. You're no longer in the dusty, embalming tent, but transported to the very heart of the afterlife, to the Hall of Two Truths, where the ultimate judgment awaits. The air here feels heavy with cosmic significance, charged with the weight of every deed, every thought, every whispered word of the deceased. A mainstream historical fact of profound importance in ancient Egyptian belief is the weighing of the heart ceremony. This was the pivotal moment, the ultimate test of a deceased individual's moral purity and worthiness to enter the field of reeds, their blissful, eternal paradise. It was the moment of reckoning, where all the earthly actions of the deceased were laid bare before a divine tribunal. It's the final exam of eternity, and failure means a rather unpleasant eternity of not existing. You stand before the grand scales of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. These are no ordinary scales. They are exquisitely balanced, representing the perfect equilibrium that Ma'at embodies. On one pan of the scales rests the heart of the deceased, not the physical, mummified organ, but its spiritual essence, believed to contain the record of all their actions, thoughts, and words during life. This is why the heart was so carefully preserved during mummification. It was the ultimate witness, the keeper of the soul's true nature. On the other pan of the scales, delicately balanced, is the feather of Ma'at. This feather, often depicted as an ostrich feather, is the symbol of truth, justice, and universal harmony. The entire fate of the deceased hinges on this one crucial moment. If the heart is lighter than, or perfectly balanced with, the feather of Ma'at, the deceased is deemed worthy. If the heart is heavy with sin, heavier than the feather, then eternal annihilation awaits. It's the ancient world's most dramatic lie detector test, with slightly more dire consequences. Presiding over this momentous judgment is Osiris, the majestic ruler of the underworld, often depicted enthroned, holding his crook and flail, symbols of kingship and dominion. Beside him stand other prominent deities of the Ennead, including Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and scribes, who meticulously records the outcome of the weighing. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification, often oversees the scales, ensuring the process is fair and precise. You can almost feel the collective gaze of these gods, their silent judgment piercing through the spiritual essence of the deceased. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, while the feather of Ma'at is the iconic counterweight, some texts or depictions occasionally show other symbolic weights being placed on the scales, such as a statuette of Ma'at herself, or even a small symbolic image representing truth or righteousness. This suggests a slight flexibility in the visual representation of this ultimate judgment, perhaps adapting to different artistic conventions or emphasizing particular nuances of Ma'at's principles. It's like different artistic interpretations of the same profound legal concept. The deceased, or rather their spiritual essence, would be guided into the Hall of Two Truths. Here, they would first deliver the negative confession, also known as the Declaration of Innocence, or 42 Declarations of Innocence. This wasn't a confession of sins, but a detailed denial of them. The deceased would address each of the 42 divine judges by name, declaring, "I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not caused pain to others, I have not fouled the water," and so on. It was an exhaustive list, affirming their moral purity and adherence to Ma'at throughout their earthly life. Imagine having to recall every single good deed, or lack of bad deed, from your entire life under the watchful eyes of cosmic deities. Talk about pressure. Historians still argue whether the negative confession was a literal declaration the deceased was expected to make, perhaps empowered by the Book of the Dead, or if it was more of a symbolic representation of the ideal moral conduct required for entry into the afterlife. Was it truly a spiritual interrogation or a theological blueprint for virtuous living? The debate speaks to the practical application versus the aspirational nature of ancient Egyptian ethics and the role of funerary texts in shaping behavior. As the heart is placed on the scales, the tension in the Hall of Two Truths is palpable. You hold your breath, figuratively speaking. The delicate balance holds the fate of eternity. If the heart is light, perfectly aligned with Ma'at's feather, a collective sigh of relief, or perhaps a ripple of approval, would pass through the divine assembly. Thoth would meticulously record the favorable verdict, opening the path to the field of reeds. But if the heart is heavy, weighed down by transgression and impurity, the scales would tip drastically. And waiting just beneath the scales, a terrifying figure lurks, Ammit, the devourer of the dead. Ammit is a monstrous hybrid beast with the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, three of ancient Egypt's most feared creatures. If the heart was deemed unworthy, Ammit would immediately devour it, leading to the second death, an eternal oblivion from which there was no return. This was the ultimate terror for the Egyptians, not just physical death, but the complete non-existence of the soul, the utter annihilation of identity. It's like having your entire digital footprint permanently erased from the cosmos. The threat of Ammit was a powerful motivator for ethical behavior in life. The entire system of mummification and the Book of the Dead was designed to ensure that the deceased could confidently pass this most critical test. Every ritual, every spell, every amulet was a preparation for this one singular moment. The triumph of passing the weighing of the heart was immense. It meant the deceased was now Makeru, true of voice or justified, having been vindicated before the gods. They had earned their right to eternal bliss. This justification also implied that they now had the power to speak and act freely. In the afterlife, truly coming forth by day, you can almost feel the joy, the immense relief that would wash over the successful soul. The long journey through the Duat, the meticulous preparations by the embalmers, the investment in the Book of the Dead, it all culminates in this moment of divine acceptance. The path to the field of reeds, their personal paradise, is now open. The concept of the weighing of the heart permeates Egyptian thought and art, appearing in countless tomb paintings, papyri, and sarcophagi. It was not just a belief, but a central tenet that shaped their daily lives, encouraging adherence to Ma'at, truth, justice, and cosmic balance in every action. It's a testament to a civilization that understood the profound connection between earthly morality and eternal destiny. As the verdict is rendered, whether of triumph or terrifying despair, the scene begins to fade. The mummy, in its quiet tomb, has symbolically passed through this ultimate trial. Its meticulously prepared form is now awaiting the final, peaceful rest that only the blessed could achieve. The weighing of the heart stands as the ultimate gate, and for the worthy, it swings open, inviting them into the serene pastures of eternity. The judgment is made, and the soul is ready for its final, blissful repose. The ultimate test has been passed. The heart, light and true, has balanced perfectly with the feather of Ma'at. The scales of divine justice have affirmed the deceased's worthiness, and Thoth has meticulously recorded the triumphant verdict. The terrifying threat of Ammit, the devourer, has receded, and the perilous journey through the Duat, the underworld, has culminated in success. You sense the shift in atmosphere, from the tense judgment of the Hall of Two Truths to a quieter, more permanent peace. The mummy, your charge, has achieved its spiritual victory, and now it is time for its final, earthly repose. A mainstream historical fact of ancient Egypt is that after the arduous process of mummification and the symbolic navigation of the underworld, the deceased's body was interred in an elaborate sarcophagus and placed within a meticulously constructed tomb. This wasn't merely a burial. It was the final, physical manifestation of their journey to eternity, designed to protect the mummy and its treasures for millennia, ensuring the Ka and Ba had a stable, eternal home to return to. Think of it as the ultimate luxury apartment. Complex, but for the deceased, you are now transported from the ethereal plane of judgment back to the tangible world of ancient Egypt, to the necropolis, the city of the dead. Imagine the towering cliffs of the Valley of the Kings, or the vast, silent expanses of Saqqara, dotted with the subtle entrances of mastabas and the grand facades of rock-cut tombs. The air here is dry, dusty, carrying the faint, earthy scent of ancient stone and undisturbed sand. The sarcophagus itself is a work of art and a significant investment. For royalty and high-ranking nobles, these would be monumental, often crafted from fine stone like granite, basalt, or quartzite, meticulously carved and polished. You can see the intricate hieroglyphs covering its surface, spells and prayers, copied directly from the Book of the Dead, acting as another layer of spiritual protection. Images of protective deities, like the goddesses Isis and Nephthys, often adorned the foot and head ends, their outstretched wings offering eternal embrace. Inside the outer stone sarcophagus, there might be multiple nested coffins. This isn't just an aesthetic choice. It's a profound display of wealth, and a layered system of protection. You might find a brightly painted wooden coffin, perhaps gilded, encased within the stone sarcophagus, and within that, another, even more, finely decorated coffin, sometimes shaped to the contours of the mummy itself, with a sculpted face reflecting the deceased's features, or an idealized divine countenance. It's like a set of Russian dolls, each one more precious than the last, culminating in the ultimate prize within. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, while we often associate sarcophagi with grand human-shaped forms, some early sarcophagi were much simpler, rectangular boxes, and conversely, some very elaborate and unique sarcophagi exist, like the feathered or rishi coffins of the Second Intermediate Period, covered in a pattern resembling falcon feathers, further emphasizing the deceased's identification with Horus and the sky. This shows a fascinating evolution in funerary art and technology, a continuous search for the perfect eternal home. It's like watching coffin design evolve from a basic shoebox to a custom-built aerodynamic vehicle. The act of placing the mummy into its final resting place was itself a solemn ceremony. The wrapped mummy, perhaps now adorned with a magnificent funerary mask like the famous gold mask of Tutankhamun, would be carefully lifted and laid to rest within the innermost coffin. The mask, a stylized representation of the deceased or a god, served to provide a perfect, idealized face for the Ki to recognize and return to me, even if the actual face of the mummy deteriorated over time. Historians still argue whether the complexity and grandeur of the tomb and sarcophagi were primarily driven by a genuine belief in their necessity for eternal life, or if they increasingly became a display of earthly power, wealth, and political influence. Was it spiritual devotion or conspicuous consumption for the afterlife? The answer likely lies in a complex interplay of both, but the scale of some of these constructions suggests that earthly status certainly played a significant role in dictating the opulence of one's eternal abode. Once the mummy was safely within its nested coffins and sarcophagus, it would be transported to the tomb. The tombs themselves varied enormously, from simple pits in the sand for the poorest, to elaborate, multi-chambered subterranean complexes for pharaohs and high officials. Regardless of their size, all tombs shared a common purpose: to be a permanent, secure dwelling for the deceased and their funerary equipment, isolating them from the destructive forces of the living world. You can almost feel the cool, dry air as you enter a tomb, the faint echo of footsteps on ancient stone. The walls, for the wealthy, would be covered in vibrant paintings and meticulously carved reliefs. These weren't just decorations. They were living narratives for the afterlife. They depicted scenes of the deceased's earthly life, their achievements, banquets, and offerings to the gods. Crucially, they also illustrated scenes from the Book of the Dead and other funerary texts, acting as another visual aid and magical reinforcement for the deceased's journey through the underworld. These paintings ensured that even if the papyrus scrolls were lost, the essential spells and divine figures would forever be present. It's like having a mural-sized interactive guide to your personal eternity. Alongside the sarcophagus, the tomb would be filled with an astonishing array of grave goods. These were objects intended to provide for the deceased's needs and desires in the afterlife. You'd see furniture, clothing, cosmetic containers, tools, games, food and drink, and countless ushabti figures. These ushabti or shabdis were small, mummiform figurines, often inscribed with spell 6 from the Book of the Dead, which compelled them to come to life and perform any manual labor the deceased might be called upon to do in the field of reeds. It was the ultimate cheat code for avoiding eternal chores. Simply send your magical servants. Imagine the wealth contained within these tombs: gold, silver, precious stones, fine linen, exquisite craftsmanship. Each item, no matter how mundane in life, became infused with spiritual significance in death. The tomb was a microcosm of the deceased's ideal existence, stocked with everything they could possibly need or desire, ensuring their comfort and prosperity in the afterlife. The final act was often the sealing of the tomb. Entrances would be blocked with massive stone slabs, and passages filled with rubble, designed to deter grave robbers and preserve the sanctity of the resting place. Priests would perform final rituals, ensuring the tomb was magically protected. The air inside would become still, silent, a chamber holding eternity, undisturbed by the passage of time. This meticulous effort in constructing and furnishing the tomb highlights the profound Egyptian belief that the afterlife was a continuation of earthly existence, albeit a perfected one. They weren't seeking to escape life, but to eternalize it in its most ideal form. The tomb was their gateway, their eternal home, guaranteeing the continued existence of the Ka and Ba. As you perceive the sealed entrance of a grand tomb, the dust settling, the silence descending, you realize the culmination of all those weeks of embalming. The physical body, once vibrant with life, is now an enduring relic, safeguarded by stone and magic, awaiting the cyclical return of its spirit components. The deceased has finally reached their final resting place, the secure sanctuary where they will begin their eternal sleep, or rather, their eternal waking in the field of reeds. But even such meticulous precautions couldn't always guarantee an undisturbed slumber, as we'll soon discover. The tomb is sealed, the treasures await, and the long sleep begins. The tomb, a monument to eternal peace, is sealed. The sarcophagus, adorned with prayers and protective deities, cradles the perfectly preserved mummy, surrounded by an astonishing array of grave goods, the furniture, the food, the ushabti, figures, all meticulously arranged for a perpetual existence. You linger, a spectral presence, in the silent, dust-filled chamber, aware of the profound effort invested in creating this sanctuary. The intention, undeniably, was for an undisturbed, eternal slumber. Yet history, in its often cruel fashion, tells a different story. A mainstream historical fact, perhaps one of the most disheartening truths about ancient Egyptian funerary practices, is the widespread and pervasive nature of tomb robbery. Despite elaborate precautions, curses, and hidden passages, very few ancient Egyptian tombs remained undisturbed for long. From ancient times, even predating the Romans, to relatively modern discoveries, tomb robbery was an unfortunate, almost inevitable, consequence of burying such immense wealth with the deceased. It was, in essence, the ancient world's most lucrative and most dangerous treasure hunt. You can almost feel the shift in the air, from serene peace to a creeping sense of violation. Imagine the clandestine movements, not of priests, but of desperate men, perhaps under the cover of night, driven by the lure of unimaginable riches. They weren't seeking spiritual enlightenment. They were seeking gold, jewels, and anything else of value that could be melted down, sold, or worn. This wasn't a ritual. It was a raid. The methods of tomb robbers were often crude but effective. They didn't have dynamite, but they had shovels, chisels, and an intimate knowledge of the tomb architecture, often passed down through generations of illicit activity. Sometimes it was even former tomb builders or necropolis workers who became the robbers, leveraging their insider knowledge to pinpoint vulnerable points or secret entrances. It's like the very people who designed your home also left a spare key under the doormat for later. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, there's evidence that in some cases, tomb robbery wasn't just individual enterprise, but was organized on a larger scale, sometimes even involving corrupt officials who might provide information or turn a blind eye for a cut of the loot. There are ancient papyri detailing court proceedings against tomb robbers, revealing a surprisingly sophisticated judicial system trying to grapple with this persistent problem. Imagine an ancient Egyptian version of CSI Necropolis, complete with shady informants and incriminating fingerprints, though perhaps less forensic science. You envision a scene, the faint glimmer of a lamp, illuminating dust motes dancing in the disturbed air, the rhythmic chipping of a chisel against stone, a sound that, to the ancient Egyptians, would have been the ultimate blasphemy, the desecration of the sacred. The tomb was designed to protect the Ka and Ba, to ensure their return to a whole body and a well-provisioned afterlife. Robbery, therefore, was not just theft. It was a profound act of spiritual endangerment, threatening the very eternity of the deceased. The robbers would often focus on the most valuable items first, the gold and silver jewelry, the precious metals inlaid in furniture, the fine linens. They would sometimes be surprisingly efficient, discarding less valuable items like pottery or basic tools in their haste. The mummy itself, while perhaps not their primary target for its own sake, often suffered collateral damage as they ripped off gold leaf, unraveled bandages in search of hidden amulets, or simply tossed the body aside in their frantic search for wealth. Historians still argue whether the elaborate curses inscribed on tomb walls, threatening divine retribution upon anyone who disturbed the deceased, were genuinely feared by the robbers, or if economic desperation simply outweighed any spiritual apprehension. Did the robbers truly believe in the curse of the Pharaohs, or was it just a convenient deterrent for the credulous? The fact that so many tombs were robbed suggests that for many, the allure of earthly riches trumped the fear of eternal damnation. You might hear the frantic tearing of linen as bandages, carefully applied over weeks, are ripped apart in minutes. Amulets, intended as eternal protectors, are stripped away for their material value. The face of the mummy, perhaps once serene beneath its mask, might be exposed to the harsh light, its features collapsing as the air rushes in, thousands of years of stability undone in moments. It's a tragic reversal of all the careful work, a horrifying undoing of the promise of eternal sleep. The damage inflicted by tomb robbers varied. Some might meticulously remove only the precious metals, leaving the body relatively intact, but stripped. Others, in their greed or frustration, might mutilate the mummy, breaking bones or scattering remains in their destructive search. The scene after a robbery would be one of chaos and desecration, a stark contrast to the ordered peace of the burial. The consequences for captured tomb robbers when they were caught could be severe. Ancient records show punishments ranging from forced labor in mines to mutilation and even execution by impalement. This indicates the seriousness with which the authorities viewed these crimes, not just as theft, but as a direct assault on the fabric of their religious beliefs and the stability of the afterlife. The discovery of intact tombs, like that of Tutankhamun, are incredibly rare, precisely because tomb robbery was so prevalent. These rare exceptions provide us with an invaluable glimpse into the full splendor of ancient Egyptian funerary practices, a splendor that was almost universally lost to the ravages of time and greed. It's a miracle, really, that anything survived at all. You reflect on the irony. The very wealth and craftsmanship poured into the tombs to ensure eternal rest were also the primary magnets for their destruction. The Egyptians tried to seal off their dead from the living, but the living, driven by desire, found a way to bridge that gap, shattering the illusion of impenetrable sanctity. The quiet dust of the tomb now speaks not just of reverence, but of violation of human frailty and the enduring power of earthly temptation. As the shadowy figures of the robbers retreat into the night, their sacks bulging with ill-gotten gains, the tomb is left in disarray. The broken pottery, the scattered bones, the torn linen, it's a scene of utter desecration, the promise of an unbroken slumber, of an undisturbed eternity, lies shattered. But even amidst this chaos, the core belief of the Egyptians persisted, the hope for resurrection, the chance for the Ka and Ba to return to a perfect, eternal body. Even if the earthly vessel was violated, the divine plan, they hoped, could not be entirely thwarted. The tomb has been breached, the treasures plundered, but the ultimate promise of eternal life still flickers, resilient amidst the ruins. The desecration is complete, but the ultimate goal, the hope of rebirth, remains. The tomb, once a sanctuary of eternal peace, now bears the scars of violation. The precious grave goods scattered, the sarcophagus perhaps cracked open, the mummy itself possibly disfigured by grasping hands seeking hidden treasures. You stand amidst this desolation, a silent witness to the ancient crime, but even in this scene of earthly destruction, the profound conviction of the ancient Egyptians shines through, the unwavering belief in resurrection. For them, death was not an ending, and even the violation of the tomb could not entirely extinguish the hope of a glorious rebirth and eternal life. A mainstream historical fact about ancient Egyptian funerary beliefs is that the entire elaborate process of mummification, the provision of grave goods, the spells of the Book of the Dead, and the construction of massive tombs, all served one ultimate purpose: to facilitate the deceased's resurrection and continued existence in a perfected afterlife. They didn't just want to survive, they wanted to thrive in eternity, enjoying a blissful existence reminiscent of their earthly lives, but without its hardships. It was the grand finale, the ultimate reward for a life lived according to Ma'at. You can almost feel the spiritual energy lingering in the disturbed air, a profound current of hope that transcended the physical wreckage. For the Egyptians, the physical body was merely an anchor, a temporary dwelling for the Ka life force, and the Ba personality, soul. Even if the mummy was damaged, the essence of the individual, their identity, could still potentially return, provided the necessary rituals had been performed and the Book of the Dead provided its guidance. It's like your cloud backup for your consciousness. Even if your hard drive crashes, you can still restore your data. The concept of resurrection for the Egyptians wasn't a one-time event, like a final judgment and then you're done. It was more of a continuous cycle, mirroring the sun god Ra's daily rebirth from the underworld. Each night, Ra died and journeyed through the Duat, only to be reborn each morning. The deceased aspired to mimic this cycle, coming forth by day from their tomb to partake in the joys of the afterlife. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, while most attention is given to the physical mummy for the Ka and Ba to return to, the Egyptians also placed immense importance on the preservation of the deceased's name. They believed that if a person's name was forgotten or erased, their existence in the afterlife would cease. This is why pharaohs went to great lengths to immortalize their names, and why later rulers sometimes defaced the cartouches of their predecessors, an ultimate act of spiritual warfare, an attempt to erase their very being from eternity. It's like being permanently ungoogled from the cosmic search engine. You envision the Ka, the life force, as a ghostly double of the deceased, needing sustenance and a familiar body to return to. The Ba, often depicted as a human-headed bird, was the soul, free to roam from the tomb, visiting loved ones, or soaring into the heavens, but needing to return to the mummy at night. The resurrection ritual wasn't just about the body coming back to life in the tomb. It was about the Ka and Ba being reunited with a suitable, preserved vessel, allowing the individual to live on. This continuous cycle of coming forth by day meant that the deceased could, theoretically, enjoy all the pleasures they cherished in life, eating, drinking, socializing, even indulging in sexual activity, but in a perfected, blissful form. The field of reeds, their ultimate destination, was envisioned as an idyllic paradise, a fertile land of abundant harvests, where they would never experience hunger, thirst, or sorrow. It was the ultimate retirement plan, complete with eternal sunshine and unlimited resources. Historians still argue whether the Egyptian concept of resurrection implied a literal physical reanimation of the mummy, perhaps even being able to walk out of the tomb, or if it was primarily a spiritual awakening within a perfected, non-physical form in the afterlife. Was the body merely a symbolic anchor, or was it destined for a true, tangible revival? The ambiguity in the texts sparks continuous scholarly debate, highlighting the nuances of ancient religious thought and the difficulty of applying modern definitions to ancient beliefs. The elaborate tomb paintings and reliefs were not just art. They were essential components of this resurrection. They depicted the deceased offering to the gods, partaking in banquets, or engaged in farming activities in the field of reeds. These images were believed to magically become real in the afterlife, providing the deceased with eternal sustenance and ensuring their active participation in paradise. Even if the actual food offerings decayed, the painted ones would magically persist. It's like having a perpetual buffet line painted on your walls. The ritual of opening of the mouth performed on the mummy or its coffin was also crucial for resurrection. Through this ceremony, Priests would symbolically restore the mummy's senses, its ability to breathe, speak, see, hear, and eat. This ritual ensured that the deceased could interact with the afterlife, consume the magical food offerings, and participate fully in their eternal existence. Without an open mouth, how could you enjoy your eternal beer? You might sense the vibrant colors of these tomb paintings, even if faded by time, speaking of an afterlife that was anything but drab. It was a place of vibrant activity, social interaction, and continuous enjoyment. The ancient Egyptians didn't fear death as an end. They saw it as a grand, exciting adventure, a transition to an even better existence. Their entire culture was oriented towards this glorious continuation. The concept of a lasting legacy was also intertwined with resurrection. As long as a person's name was remembered and their funerary cult maintained meaning offerings were made to them, their spirit could continue to thrive in the afterlife. This gave immense importance to the living descendants' duty to honor their ancestors and ensure their continued spiritual well-being. It was a multi-generational commitment to eternal family bonds, even in the face of tomb robbery. The Egyptians might have taken solace in the belief that the spiritual integrity of the deceased was paramount. While earthly treasures might be lost, the essence of the individual, guided by the spells and the enduring power of the divine, could still achieve its ultimate destiny. The second death was the real fear, not the loss of physical possessions. As you contemplate this profound belief in resurrection, you gain a deeper appreciation for the immense effort and resources invested in Egyptian funerary practices. It wasn't just about death, it was about life, eternal life, lived in joy and abundance. The mummified body, the protected organs, the magical spells, the elaborate tomb, all were interconnected elements of a grand strategy to ensure that the individual would triumph over mortality and achieve a glorious rebirth. The desecrated tomb may bear witness to human greed, but the underlying belief in resurrection, like the morning sun, refuses to be extinguished. The hope for eternal life, for coming forth by day, burns bright, illuminating the path to a perpetual, joyful existence. The resurrection is nigh, a promise waiting to unfold. Having witnessed the ancient Egyptians' unwavering belief in resurrection and their meticulous preparations for eternal life, you find yourself pondering the echoes of these age-old rituals in our own modern understanding of death and sleep. You're no longer confined to the dusty embalming tent or the hallowed halls of the Duat. Instead, you perceive the vast stretch of time, seeing how the threads of ancient thought about the great unknown subtly weave into the fabric of contemporary culture. The air around you feels less like desert dust and more like the quiet hum of a contemporary bedroom, perhaps, or the soft glow of a screen. A mainstream historical fact is that while we no longer practice mummification or believe in a literal duat, the desire for a peaceful, eternal sleep and the myriad rituals surrounding death remain deeply ingrained in human societies. From elaborate funeral services to embalming, albeit a much less invasive, more cosmetic version, and the careful interment of loved ones. The echoes of ancient Egyptian practices resonate in our own attempts to bring comfort to the bereaved and dignity to the deceased. We may have traded canopic jars for urns and natron for formaldehyde, but the underlying impulse to preserve and honor remains. It's like we've all agreed on a softer, less intense version of their original grand design. You might find yourself reflecting on the phrase, "rest in peace." It's a common epitaph, a comforting farewell, and it directly mirrors the ancient Egyptian aspiration for eternal sleep in the field of reeds. While their sleep was more of an active, joyful existence, the core idea of a peaceful repose after life's labors is profoundly similar. We, too, wish for our loved ones to find solace and tranquility beyond the veil now. For a quirky or fringe tidbit, consider the modern practice of death doulas. Much like the ancient Egyptian embalmers and priests who guided the deceased through the transition, death doulas provide emotional, spiritual, and practical support to the dying and their families. They help prepare for death, ensuring a peaceful transition and offering comfort, while obviously not performing eviscerations or reciting spells to ward off crocodile demons. They share a fundamental purpose with their ancient counterparts: to facilitate a good death and a dignified passage. It's like an ancient role has found a modern, more palatable reincarnation, without the need for palm wine enemas. You might think about how our modern society grapples with death's inevitability. We often try to sanitize it, hide it away in hospitals and funeral homes, a stark contrast to the ancient Egyptians who integrated death and the afterlife so completely into their daily lives. Their houses were built for a lifespan, but their tombs were built for eternity. This speaks volumes about their priorities. We, perhaps, prioritize living for the moment, but still secretly hope for a pleasant eternal rest when that moment is over. Historians still argue whether the elaborate and resource-intensive nature of ancient Egyptian funerary rituals was a driving force behind technological and artistic innovation, or if these innovations were merely a byproduct of a society rich enough to indulge such a profound obsession. Did the desire for eternal life spur advancements in craftsmanship, medicine, even rudimentary anatomy and engineering? Or were these simply the luxury goods of a powerful civilization? The debate highlights the complex relationship between belief, economy, and progress in ancient societies. Think about our sleep rituals. You dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, just like the suggestion at the start of our journey. You seek comfort, quiet, and a sense of release from the day's worries. For the Egyptians, the transition into night, into sleep, was a small death, a daily rehearsal for the ultimate transition into the Duat and the morning. The waking was a small resurrection. This cyclical understanding of life and death, reflected in nature and in their own daily rhythms, imbued everything with a deeper meaning. Even the concept of preparing for death, common across many cultures, finds its zenith in ancient Egypt. From purchasing burial plots to pre-planning funeral services, we engage in our own forms of afterlife insurance. We want to ensure our final wishes are met, that our bodies are handled with respect, and that our memory endures. Just as the Egyptians sought to ensure their Ka and Ba had a stable home and their name was never forgotten. The need for continuity, for something to persist beyond physical dissolution, is a powerful human constant. You might muse on the popularity of boring history podcasts or videos like this one. Why do we find comfort in the meticulous details of ancient rituals, even those surrounding death. Perhaps it's because these stories, in their very precision and thoroughness, offer a sense of order and control over the ultimate chaos of death. The Egyptians sought to control death, to tame it, to make it predictable. And in listening to their elaborate methods, we too, perhaps unconsciously, find a degree of solace and a fascinating escape from our own anxieties about the unknown. The ancient Egyptians' focus on preserving the body for the spirit's return reminds you of how many modern cultures still value the physical remains. Embalming for viewing, respectful burial, even cremation with the scattering of ashes in a meaningful place, all are ways we ensure that the physical self, or its remnants, are treated with care, providing a tangible link for memory and mourning. We might not believe the soul literally needs to return to the body, but we still honor the vessel. Consider the role of memory. The Egyptians built monuments, wrote texts, and preserved bodies so that the deceased would not be forgotten, so their name would live on, ensuring their eternal existence. In our modern world, we create digital memorials, social media pages that become virtual gravestones, and family trees that trace our lineage. The drive to be remembered, to leave a lasting mark, is a direct echo of the Egyptian quest for immortality through enduring memory. It's like our version of ensuring our name is eternally written in stone. But now in code, as the quiet narration continues, you feel the subtle thread connecting these ancient rituals to your own present moment. The desire for a peaceful end, the hope for something beyond, the need for comfort in the face of loss. These are timeless human experiences. The ancient Egyptians, in their elaborate pursuit of eternal sleep, simply gave these universal desires a grander, more tangible, and utterly unforgettable expression. They sought to master death, not just to accept it. The silence of the imagined tomb, now blended with the quiet hum of your own surroundings, reminds you that while the specifics of ritual change, the core human impulse to navigate the transition of death with dignity, care, and hope for continued existence remains. The ancient Egyptians didn't just teach us about their past, they subtly remind us about our own present relationship with mortality and the enduring human quest for a profound and peaceful final rest. Their echoes are all around us, in our quiet good nights and our hopes for peaceful dreams. The long, winding journey through ancient Egyptian rituals for achieving eternal sleep is drawing to a close. We've traversed the meticulously prepared embalming tent, felt the biting embrace of Natron, witnessed the meticulous wrapping, journeyed through the perilous Duat, and stood in the hall of two truths, pondering the profound echoes in our modern lives. Now, as the sun begins its final, slow descent over the imagined dunes, and the air around you settles into the deep quiet of night, we arrive at the culmination, the whisper of eternal slumber itself, a mainstream historical fact that encapsulates. This final state is that the ultimate goal of all ancient Egyptian funerary practices was not merely preservation or survival, but the achievement of a perfected, blissful, and unending existence in the field of reeds. This wasn't a static, lifeless rest, but an idyllic continuation of life, free from pain, hunger, or strife. It was the promised land, the ultimate reward, the very essence of their eternal sleep. Imagine the most perfect, peaceful dream you've ever had. Then stretch it out, well, eternally, You can almost feel the gentle shift from the active pursuit of eternity to the quiet experience of it. The deceased, having passed all trials, having their Ka and Ba reunited with their perfect, preserved body, now enters this realm of unparalleled tranquility. Imagine walking through fields of tall, swaying reeds, the air perpetually mild, the sky a serene blue. The Nile, in this spiritual paradise, flows clear and abundant, providing endless water for irrigation and drink. This wasn't a place of passive lying around. Oh no. The Egyptians envisioned an active, joyful eternity. You would farm the rich soil, perpetually ensuring abundant harvests, but without the toil. Your Ushabti figures, those magical servant figurines, would leap to life to do all the heavy lifting. You'd enjoy endless banquets with loved ones, the food and drink appearing magically, perpetually fresh and delicious. You'd play games, share stories, and simply revel in the perfect, harmonious existence. It's like retiring to the world's most exclusive, eternally catered, and chore-free country club. Now, for a quirky or fringe tidbit, while the field of reeds was generally depicted as an agrarian paradise, some texts suggest unique personalizations based on the deceased's earthly profession or desires. A scribe might find eternally flowing inkwells and endless papyrus. A craftsman might have perfect tools that never dull. This subtle customization hints at a deeply personal afterlife, catering to the individual's aspirations rather than a generic heaven. It's like ordering your perfect pizza, but for your eternal destiny. You might feel the warmth of the eternal sun, perpetually setting and rising in a harmonious cycle, or perhaps a gentle breeze carrying the scent of lotus blossoms. The senses are heightened, the body perfected, free from ailments or decay. Every moment is one of contentment, a profound peace that surpasses understanding. This is the true eternal sleep they sought, not an unconscious slumber, but a conscious, joyful, and never-ending state of bliss. Historians still argue whether the concept of the field of reeds evolved from earlier, simpler ideas of an afterlife, or if it was a fully formed theological construct from the outset of the Old Kingdom. Was it a gradual refinement of their spiritual geography, or a sudden, divinely inspired revelation? The development of such a rich and detailed vision of paradise speaks volumes about their profound introspection and their deeply optimistic view of what lay beyond death. The mummified body, resting in its magnificent sarcophagus within the silent, sacred space of the tomb, serves as the ultimate anchor for this blissful existence. The Kia and Ba can come and go, journeying forth by day, interacting with the living or exploring the wider cosmos, but always returning to the physical form in the tomb at night. This unbreakable link between the physical and the spiritual was the bedrock of their belief. The tomb was not a prison. It was a secure portal, a gateway to enduring life. Think about the silence of a tomb, the quiet stillness. For us, it might evoke a sense of finality, an ending. But for the ancient Egyptians, that stillness was filled with potential. It was the quiet of a soul at peace, enjoying its eternal reward, preparing to come forth again in the morning. It was a dynamic quiet, humming with the vibrant life of the field of reeds. The profound comfort in the idea that death was not an oblivion, but merely a transition to a better state, must have shaped their entire society. It removed much of the fear we often associate with mortality, replacing it with purposeful preparation and optimistic expectation. Every decision, from the grandest pyramid to the simplest funerary offering, was infused with this future-oriented perspective. You can almost hear the soft, contented sigh of the deceased, finally at rest, yet vibrantly alive in their paradise. The long journey, the challenges, the fears of Ammit, the painstaking preparations, all fade into insignificance against the backdrop of this perfect eternity. The ancient Egyptian rituals were a magnificent, complex, and ultimately hopeful attempt to defy the finality of death, to ensure that the whisper of existence would never truly cease. As the quiet deepens and the last of the imagined sunlight vanishes from the horizon, you realize the enduring legacy of the Egyptians. They sought not just to preserve a body, but to extend consciousness, to guarantee joy, to manifest a dream of perpetual peace. Their meticulous journey of mummification was, in essence, a profound act of faith, a grand and beautiful testament to the human spirit's yearning for something more, something eternal. The concept of eternal sleep, for them, was the ultimate awakening. It was the moment where every promise made by the gods was fulfilled, where every ritual found its sacred purpose, and where the individual finally merged with the cosmic order, living forever in blissful harmony. The meticulous efforts, the vast resources, the spiritual dedication, all were in service of this profound and comforting promise. And now, as your own journey through their history concludes, the ancient whispers of eternal slumber become one with the soft sounds of your present moment, the detailed procedures, the symbolic meanings, the hopes and fears of millennia past, all coalesce into a final, calming thought. The Egyptians believed they could control death, not just for kings, but for themselves, achieving a peace that stretches far beyond our understanding. That profound belief, and the elaborate journey they undertook to realize it, leaves you with a deep, quiet sense of awe